name is Savannah Blake, and I used to believe that being the quiet one, the helpful one, would keep me safe. I was wrong. I planned my parents' 45th anniversary trip down to the last detail: the train tickets, the dinner, the hotel, everything. On the day we were supposed to leave, I showed up at the station and found out my seat was already taken. By someone else. By my brother's new girlfriend. No one had told me. Just a message from my mom. "It's covered, don't worry." I stood there on the platform alone, watching the train pull away without me. No apology, no explanation. That's when it clicked. People who never ask for anything are the first ones left behind. Before I share the rest of what happened, let me know where you're watching from. Tap that like button if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family. And subscribe if you're ready to hear more stories about breaking free from toxic family patterns. Let's go back to where it all began. I was the firstborn, and from the start I learned quickly that being quiet made life easier for everyone. If Mom had a headache, I'd tiptoe around the kitchen and make her toast without being asked. If Dad came home in a bad mood, I'd make sure the living room was spotless and his favorite show was playing. I didn't cry too loud, I didn't argue, I didn't need much. And because I didn't need much, I didn't get much either. My little brother Jack, on the other hand, was chaos wrapped in charm. He broke things, forgot things, shouted when he was frustrated, laughed too loud at the dinner table. He was wild. He was adored. I used to watch how my mother would light up when Jack walked into the room. It was like she suddenly remembered she had children. With me, she didn't really look up, not unless something was out of place. I remember one Saturday when Jack spilled juice all over the carpet. I scrambled to clean it up before Dad got home. While I was blotting it out with paper towels, Mom just looked over and said, "Thank you, sweetheart, you're so responsible." Then she called Jack over and handed him a cookie for being honest. That was the pattern. Jack created the mess. I cleaned it up. He got the praise. I got the responsibility. I thought if I kept being useful, maybe I'd earn something more than just silence. Maybe they'd see me. Maybe they'd care. But they never really asked what I wanted, what I needed. When I think about my childhood, I don't remember birthday parties or bedtime stories. I remember being the one who remembered everything: field trip forms, grocery lists, who liked their eggs scrambled and who liked them fried. I was the unofficial manager of the Blake family's emotional stability, and I took that job seriously. No one gave me that job. I just stepped into the role because someone had to. And honestly, for a long time I was proud of it. I wore my competence like armor. But the truth is, being capable isn't the same as being cared for. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. There was one afternoon, I couldn't have been more than 9, when I made dinner because Mom had locked herself in her room. Jack was playing video games, the house was dark, and no one else was going to do it. So I made grilled cheese sandwiches. I even cut the crusts off because Jack liked it that way. We ate in silence at the kitchen table, just the two of us, plates wobbling on old placemats. He didn't say thank you. He never did. And honestly, I never expected him to. That night, I overheard my mom on the phone with my aunt. She said, "Savannah's so low maintenance, thank God. I couldn't handle 2 Jacks." I stood in the hallway and let that sink in. I wasn't a person to her. I was a relief. Low maintenance, like a plant that waters itself. That sentence lived inside me for years. Every time I thought about asking for something, a ride, a favor, even a hug, I'd remember those words and swallow the need. I became the girl who never needed anything, the girl who had it all together, the girl who could handle it. Until one day, I couldn't. But we're not there yet. We're still in that house, with its fading wallpaper and uneven floors. And I'm still a child, still thinking that being helpful is the same thing as being loved. Spoiler, it's not. I was the one who remembered everyone's birthday but never had a party of my own. When relatives came over, I'd be the one in the kitchen slicing the cake, while Jack got to blow out the candles, even on years when it wasn't his day. He had a way of making things his, the attention, the space in the room, even the air. I learned to shrink. I learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken. I knew when Mom needed aspirin, when Dad was about to snap, when Jack was on the edge of another meltdown. I studied them the way some kids studied spelling lists. I got good at it. I became useful, invisible, essential, but easy to forget. It's strange how a child can understand that love might come with conditions, or that some people are allowed to be loud and messy and still adored, while others have to earn affection by never needing anything at all. Jack got away with everything. He crashed Dad's car at 17. I was the one who called the tow truck, handled the insurance, and cleaned up the mess, literally and emotionally. He dropped out of college after the first semester. Guess who convinced my parents not to cut him off? He borrowed money from me more times than I can count. Sometimes he paid it back. Most times, he didn't. And yet, the golden glow around him never dimmed. They said things like, "He just needs more time," or "He's got a good heart," or "He's been through a lot." But so had I. Only difference was I didn't make a scene about it. I remember one Thanksgiving when Jack brought home his latest girlfriend, Lucy. Mom bent over backwards to welcome her, made her a special gluten-free pie, printed her name on a place card. Meanwhile, I sat at the end of the table next to the kitchen door. No card, no pie. Just a stack of used napkins someone had dumped next to my plate. And you know what? I didn't say a word. Because by then, I had internalized the story they wrote about me. The calm one, the capable one, the one who always shows up, always fixes things, never complains. The background character in my own life. It wasn't anger I felt. Not at first. It was something harder to name. Something like hollowness. Like watching your own reflection disappear the longer you stare. They didn't see me, not really, and maybe I started to believe I didn't deserve to be seen. I remember once overhearing my mother say to a neighbor, "Jack's my wild child, Savannah, she's my rock." The way she said it made it sound like a compliment, but rocks don't get tucked in at night. Rocks don't get hugged when they cry. Rocks are stepped on and expected not to break. That's what I was. Solid, reliable, unmoving. But even rocks crack under pressure. They split down the middle when the ground shifts too many times, and somewhere inside me something was starting to shift. I didn't know it then, but a fracture had begun. A quiet hairline split in the foundation of who I thought I had to be, and when it finally broke open, it would change everything. But for now, I was still holding it together, still smiling at family dinners, still saying, "No, it's fine, I've got it." Still hoping, maybe one day, they'd look at me and ask, "What do you need, Savannah?" They never did. So eventually I stopped waiting. The plan had taken weeks. I'd booked the hotel, called the caterer twice to confirm the menu, designed a printed itinerary that included mealtimes, sightseeing, and quiet breaks for Mom's migraines. I even ordered custom luggage tags with everyone's initials. For their 45th wedding anniversary, I wanted it to be perfect. I needed it to be perfect. Because that's what I did. I made things run smoothly. I kept people happy. I anticipated needs before anyone spoke them out loud. That morning at the train station, I wore a soft blue dress and my nicest flats. I had the tickets in my bag, grouped in little envelopes. I was early, as always. I waited beside the platform, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. And when I saw them, Mom, Dad, Jack, and a girl I didn't recognize, I smiled, relieved, until I walked up and realized something was wrong. The energy shifted. Jack looked away. My mother's lips were tight. Dad busied himself adjusting his coat. I stepped toward the staff member checking tickets and gave her my name. She frowned at the list. "Sorry, your name isn't here." I laughed softly. "That can't be right. I booked the whole thing." She shook her head. "You'll have to talk to the organizer." So I turned to Mom. Her smirk came quickly. I knew that look. Dismissive, cool, a performance she reserved for moments she thought I was being dramatic. "Did you really think you were invited?" she said, loud enough for Jack and the girl to hear. "Strangers aren't allowed." Strangers. My own mother called me a stranger. Something in me buckled, but I kept my face still. I looked at the girl. Lucy, I later learned. She held Jack's hand tightly, eyes darting away from mine. My seat, my itinerary, my place on that train had gone to her, and not one of them had told me. I turned back to the platform, watching the train doors begin to close. My heart should have been racing, but it wasn't. It was still. Hollow. "I see," I said quietly. Then I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and nodded. "Then I'll live like a stranger." And I walked away. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just walked, my shoes tapping the stone tiles with the kind of silence only a lifetime of being ignored can teach you. Behind me, the train pulled away, taking with it a family I had spent my entire life trying to belong to. There were no follow-up calls, no apologies, not even a message to explain why. Just that one text from Mom, sent the night before, that I hadn't read until later. It's covered, don't worry. 3 words that said everything. Covered, as in replaced, handled. Don't worry, as in don't make a scene, be quiet, as usual. It wasn't just a missed trip, it was a moment of erasure. A clear, cold reminder that no matter how much I gave, how carefully I tried to matter, I was optional. The saddest part? I wasn't even surprised. That's the thing about growing up invisible. After a while, when people forget you, it doesn't even sting the way it should. You just start wondering why you ever thought it would be different. After the train station, I went home and sat in my living room for hours. No music, no TV, just silence. And in that silence, the memories came rushing in. One after another, like waves that had been waiting for the tide to turn. 5 years ago, my parents moved into my apartment. They said it would be just temporary while they figured things out after Dad lost his job and Mom's health took a dip. I gave them the master bedroom. I bought blackout curtains for Mom's migraines, stocked the fridge with Dad's favorite yogurt, and tiptoed around their moods like I was a guest in my own home. Temporary turned into permanent. Then permanent turned into expected. I stopped dating. I stayed late at work to avoid tension. I paid every bill without asking for a dime. Not once did they offer to contribute. Not once did they say thank you. Then there was Jack. Jack had always been a mess, but in his 20s, that mess came with a price tag. He crashed 2 cars. I helped him get a loan to replace the second. He racked up thousands in credit card debt. I quietly paid off half so his credit wouldn't tank. He lost jobs faster than he could update his resume. I was the one who rewrote that resume 3 times. I did it all without fanfare, without guilt tripping. Because I thought, this is what you do for family. You show up, you help, you give. I didn't realize until much later that I was the only one following that script. There was a night I'll never forget. Jack had gotten into some kind of trouble. I never knew the full story. But he called me in a panic saying he needed $2,500 or he'd lose everything. I wired the money within the hour. 2 days later he posted a photo on Instagram. New sneakers, bottle service, smiling with Lucy at a rooftop bar. He didn't even bother to lie about it. And I didn't call him out. I just swallowed it. Because that's what I did. I became the bank, the therapist, the buffer, the fallback plan, the one who knew how to handle things. But there's something no one tells you about being the strong one. People stop checking in. They assume you're okay. They assume you don't need. And eventually you start assuming it too. You forget what it feels like to be comforted. You forget what it feels like to receive. You forget that love isn't supposed to be a performance review. One night I saw a quote online, just a simple sentence, and it stopped me cold. The person who never asks for anything is the first one forgotten. I stared at those words for a long time. It felt like someone had written them just for me. Like they had been watching my life and finally gave it a name. I wasn't forgotten because I was unimportant. I was forgotten because I had trained everyone, trained myself, to believe I didn't need anything. And now, standing outside the family I had helped hold together, watching them ride away on a train I paid for, I realized something far more painful than betrayal. They didn't take advantage of me. I let them. A few days after the train incident, I found myself going through an old photo album. It was buried under a stack of papers in my closet, leather-bound, dusty, a little worn at the corners. One of those things you keep but don't look at for years. I had made the album myself back when I was still trying to capture good memories, trying to prove to myself that we were okay. Page after page, there were smiling faces. Dad grilling in the backyard, spatula in hand like a microphone. Mom in her Sunday dress, arranging flowers she didn't grow. Jack, always front and center, always a little too loud for the frame. And then there were the group shots, family vacations, birthdays, graduations. Everyone gathered on porches, couches, picnic blankets. I kept turning pages, eyes scanning each image until something started to feel off. In so many of them, I wasn't there. Literally. At first I thought maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe I'd stepped out. Maybe I was taking the picture. But then it kept happening. The Christmas photo from the year I bought everyone matching sweaters, I wasn't in it. The beach trip I paid for. No trace of me on the sand. Mom's birthday dinner. I remembered baking the cake, but in the photo I was nowhere near the table. It was like I had been there for everyone, but never with anyone. The person behind the camera, the person driving the car, the person booking the reservation and clearing the plates. And suddenly it hit me. I had documented a family that didn't include me, not because they edited me out, but because I had made myself small enough to be overlooked. That realization sat heavy in my chest. It's a strange kind of grief, the kind that doesn't come from losing someone, but from realizing they never truly held space for you in the first place. I thought about that train again, about how no one had messaged me after I walked away. Not even Jack. Not even a half-hearted, "You okay?" And the most painful part? They probably didn't think they had done anything wrong. To them, I wasn't angry. I wasn't loud. I didn't yell or throw accusations. I just stepped back, like I always had. And that's how people justify forgetting you. They tell themselves you're fine. They say things like, "She's strong," or "She never makes a fuss," or "She's probably busy anyway." They confuse your silence with contentment, your boundaries with coldness, your endurance with indifference. But inside, you're breaking in places they can't even name. That night, I took a photo of one of those old family pictures, the one where they were all laughing around the dinner table, plates full, glasses raised. And then I zoomed in on the reflection in the mirror behind them. There I was, blurred, half hidden, holding a camera, the only evidence that I had been there at all. I stared at that reflection for a long time, and then I deleted the photo from my phone, not out of spite, but because I finally understood. Being present isn't the same as being seen. In the weeks that followed, I stopped reaching out. No texts, no calls. I didn't check my parents' calendar to remind them of doctor's appointments. I didn't Venmo Jack for his rent shortfall again. I didn't comment on family photos posted online. And you know what happened? Nothing. The silence wasn't filled. The space I'd occupied wasn't missed. Life went on. For them. And for me, something unexpected happened too. The silence, once so painful, began to feel honest. There was a strange kind of peace in no longer performing, no longer bracing for guilt, no longer pretending that being needed was the same as being valued. It made me think of something I read years ago, a quote from a stranger on the internet, of all places. Just a single sentence, but it stayed with me. The person who carries everything is always the first to be forgotten when it drops. I used to think being reliable would make me indispensable, that if I kept solving problems, one day they'd realize I was the glue. But the truth is, glue doesn't get noticed until it stops holding things together. And when it does, it's often blamed for the break. I started revisiting memories I'd buried, times I'd shown up, quietly, completely, and been treated like background noise. Like when Jack was in his second rehab stint, and Mom called crying at 2 a.m., I drove 3 hours through the snow to sit with her. I made tea, I rubbed her back. She cried herself to sleep on the couch, and I stayed up until sunrise, folding laundry and loading the dishwasher. The next morning, she told me I was too calm and that maybe I didn't care as much as Jack did. I remember sitting there, exhausted, holding a chipped mug and wondering what else I had to do to be enough. That was the story of my life. When I gave too little, I was selfish. When I gave too much, I was invisible. It's a rigged system, this kind of family dynamic, one where the loudest pain gets the most attention and the quietest loyalty gets overlooked. And the thing is, I wasn't perfect. I had my own flaws, my own triggers. I wasn't always warm or patient. Sometimes I was sharp with my words or too quick to retreat. But I had shown up, over and over again. I had held their pain in my hands like it was fragile glass. And still, I had become disposable. Not because they hated me. That would have been easier in a way. But because they never really saw me in the first place. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. It was the kind of ache that seeps into your bones, the kind that rewrites how you see yourself, how you understand the word home. I remember sitting on my porch one evening, watching the sky turn that soft pink-orange color it gets just before dusk. A neighbor's wind chimes were tinkling in the breeze, and everything felt still. And I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, maybe it's not that I'm too much. Maybe it's that they never made space for all of me. That was the first time I stopped trying to shrink. The first time I thought, maybe, just maybe, I don't have to keep carrying what was never mine to hold. I didn't leave in a blaze of glory. There were no slammed doors, no dramatic speeches, no teary goodbyes, just a quiet morning, a packed trunk, and a map folded neatly on the passenger seat. I left before sunrise, when the sky was still a soft gray and the world felt half asleep. I didn't even tell anyone I was going. For the first time in my life, I didn't explain myself. The only sound was the hum of the engine as I pulled away from the driveway that never felt like mine. My destination wasn't grand or symbolic. It was a little town called Woodridge, nestled somewhere near the Canadian border. I had found it once on a road trip years ago and never forgotten the way it made me feel, like time slowed down there, like I could breathe a little easier. I drove through winding roads flanked by tall autumn trees, their leaves catching the early morning light in shades of gold and rust. It felt like nature itself was whispering, "It's okay. You can let go now." As the miles stretched behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not happiness, not excitement, just the absence of weight. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for someone to need me. No one knew where I was. No one could ask for a favor or send a crisis disguised as a casual text. I was free from the unspoken contract that had defined most of my adult life. I had no idea what I would do in Woodridge. I hadn't planned anything beyond getting there. But that felt like enough. When I pulled into town, I passed a small coffee shop with flower boxes in the windows. A hardware store with hand-painted signs, a park where a woman was walking her dog and waving at every passing car. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't impressive, but it felt honest. I checked into a rental cottage just outside of town. It was small, 2 rooms, faded curtains, creaky floors, but the moment I stepped inside, I knew. This was mine. There were no family photos on the shelves. No expectations hidden in the furniture, just silence and space. I sat on the edge of the bed that first night and took a long breath. It was the kind of breath that reaches your ribs, your back, your shoulders. The kind of breath you don't know you've been holding for years. And then I did something I never thought I would. I turned off my phone, not just airplane mode, off, total silence. That night, wrapped in a thrifted quilt and surrounded by nothing but wind and crickets, I felt a kind of safety I hadn't known I was missing. It wasn't the kind that came from locks or walls or alarm systems. It came from absence. No guilt, no obligations, no one to perform for, just me. And for once, that was enough. 2 days after I settled into the cottage, I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank email. The subject line was simple: new lease terms. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because it was the first time I was saying it. I typed slowly, carefully, no anger, no long explanations, just facts. I explained that starting next month, my parents would need to begin paying market rent for the apartment they had been living in, for free, for the last 5 years. I included the exact amount, a PDF of the new lease agreement, and a note that they had 2 weeks to respond. I didn't offer reasons. I didn't apologize. I didn't say, "I hope this isn't too hard on you," or "let me know if you need more time." Because for once I wasn't cushioning the truth for them. I pressed send and stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Then I closed the laptop and stepped outside into the crisp air. The sky was the kind of clear that only small towns seem to get. I sat on the porch and waited. Not for a reply, but for the guilt to come. It didn't. What came instead was a strange calm, like finally telling the truth, even silently, had loosened something deep inside me. That evening, I walked down to the edge of the lake behind the cottage. The water was still. My reflection looked back at me, not tired or anxious, but steady, whole. And then my phone buzzed. I had turned it back on just to check my bank app, but there it was, a message from my mother. It read, "Wow, so you're charging us now? Is this what family means to you?" No hello, no question, just accusation. A part of me expected it, but seeing it in writing still made my stomach tighten. I didn't reply. The next morning, a second message arrived, this time from my father. It was longer, more formal. He wanted to discuss terms, perhaps revisit the arrangement in person. He even attached a scanned copy of their original move-in agreement, which was, unsurprisingly, never actually signed. I closed the message and filed it away. For once, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself or prove I was right. Because here's what I had finally realized. I wasn't doing this because I needed the money. I was doing it because I needed my life back. For years, I'd been operating like a safety net. Quiet, elastic, always catching the fall. But safety nets get stretched. They wear thin. And one day, they break. I didn't want to break. I just didn't want to keep pretending that my boundaries were negotiable. That weekend, I bought myself a small wooden sign at the local market. Hand-painted, slightly crooked, but it spoke to me. It said, "Welcome, but on my terms." I hung it outside the cottage door just below the lantern. A week passed, then 2. No lease was signed, no rent arrived, but neither did I cave. Instead, I started planting herbs in the windowsill. I rearranged the furniture. I subscribed to the local newspaper and learned the name of the woman at the bakery who made the best cinnamon rolls in the county. Life began to take shape again, not as an emergency response center, but as a home. And every time I walked past the door and saw that sign, I smiled. Because I wasn't just setting terms for a lease. I was finally setting terms for my own life. It didn't take long for the backlash to arrive. The messages from my parents had been the first warning shot, but what came next was something else entirely. One Thursday morning, I opened the mailbox outside the cottage and found a manila envelope with my father's handwriting on it. At first, I thought it was a letter, maybe even an apology, though I don't know why that still seemed possible. Inside was a formal notice, typed, double-spaced, legal language. He wanted to enter into a mediated discussion regarding the lease agreement and familial obligations therein. He had cited some clause about long-standing informal support agreements within kinship structures. I laughed out loud. He'd lawyered me. For 5 years, I'd housed them without a lease, paid utilities, groceries, maintenance, never asked for repayment, never set a deadline. And now that I was asking for fairness, I was being treated like an adversary. There was no thank you for the years they lived in comfort on my dime. No we understand or let's talk about this. Just a document designed to intimidate me. It was so surreal I read it 3 times. Then I set it down on the table and stared at the steam rising from my coffee. That letter didn't break me. What broke me, what really sliced through the last pieces of hope, was what came later that day. A voicemail from my mother. Her voice was trembling, not with sadness but fury. "You've turned your back on this family," she said. "Everything your father and I have done for you, and this is how you repay us. You're making things harder than they need to be. This is how families fall apart." I sat in the kitchen, phone in hand, listening to her words loop over and over. Not once did she ask how I was. Not once did she say she missed me. Not once did she acknowledge my absence as something that mattered. She was angry I had stopped playing my part, that was all. To her, my distance wasn't a wound. It was an inconvenience. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there letting her voice bounce off the walls of my little cottage, and when it ended, I deleted the message. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. Because here's the thing no one tells you about breaking a cycle. It doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like guilt, like betrayal, like you're the one doing something wrong, even when you're finally doing what's right for you. But growth, I've learned, doesn't come dressed as peace. It comes in chaos, in doubt, in sleepless nights and heartaches that make you question everything. But it also comes with clarity. And in that moment, something inside me settled. I realized I had spent my entire life being loyal to people who were only loyal to their comfort. And the minute I disrupted that comfort, I became the villain. But I wasn't a villain, I was just finally choosing myself. I folded the legal letter, placed it in a drawer, and lit a candle in the kitchen. Lavender and cedar, calming, grounding. Then I walked out to the porch, wrapped myself in a blanket, and watched the sun dip behind the trees. The sky glowed in colors I didn't have names for. And I thought, not with anger, but with a quiet kind of knowing, if protecting my peace makes me the bad guy in someone else's story, then so be it. I'd spent too long being the silent hero in theirs. I should have known he'd show up eventually. Jack had a way of reappearing right when the fallout hit. He never stayed to clean up the mess, but he always came looking for shelter once the dust settled. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting on the front steps of the cottage, sipping coffee, watching squirrels chase each other across the fence line. The kind of morning that made you forget the world could be cruel. Then I heard the engine. An unfamiliar car pulled up, tires crunching over the gravel. At first I didn't recognize him. He looked tired, older, like the charm had worn thin and the consequences had caught up. Jack stepped out slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. "Hey, Sav," he said. I didn't move. He tried to smile, but it didn't stick. "You got a minute?" I stood and crossed my arms. "What do you need?" He sighed, the weight of it loud in the quiet air. "She left," he said. "Lucy. Took her stuff. Said she needed someone who wasn't broken." There was a flicker of something in his face. Pain, maybe, or shame. Hard to tell with Jack. He always had a way of performing emotion just enough to make you second-guess your instincts. "I'm staying at a motel," he continued. "I've got some interviews next week. Just need a place to crash for a few nights, nothing big, just till I figure things out." It was all so familiar. The half-explanation, the vague promises, the soft plea beneath the words, "Fix this for me," like you always do. And for a brief second I felt it. That old urge to say yes, to make things easier, to offer my couch, my fridge, my time, to step into the role I'd rehearsed since childhood. The fixer, the buffer, the backup plan. But then I remembered. The train station, the missed invitation, the years of being invisible while Jack soaked up the spotlight. I looked at him and realized something that made my stomach sink. He didn't come because he missed me. He came because Lucy left, because Mom and Dad were too proud or too angry to help, because I was the last door he could knock on. And in that moment, I saw our entire dynamic for what it was. A loop, a cycle I had been spinning in for decades. Every time I helped, the wheel turned again, and every time I said no, it creaked to a halt. So I said it. "No." He blinked. "What?" "I'm not your safety net anymore, Jack." He laughed nervously. "Come on, it's just a few days. You're really gonna turn your back on me?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm finally turning toward myself." For a moment, we just stood there. Two siblings who had grown up in the same house but lived in different realities. "You've always been so cold," he muttered. "You act like you're better than everyone." I didn't flinch. "And you've always acted like the rules don't apply to you," I said. "But they do now. At least with me." He shook his head, got back in the car, and drove off without another word. I watched the taillights disappear down the road, and to my surprise, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel triumph either. I felt clean, like someone who had finally washed off years of being used. Back inside, I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, the silence hugging me like an old friend. And for the first time in a very long time, I whispered to myself, "You did the right thing." The day after Jack left, I sat down with my bank statements and a legal pad. It was time. I had spent years funding emergencies that weren't mine, quietly covering rent, cell phone bills, vet visits for Jack's dog, grocery runs for my parents. 100 tiny transactions that seemed harmless at the time, but they had cost me more than money. They had cost me peace. I made a list. Not to send, just for me. Every recurring charge tied to someone else. Mom's pharmacy auto refill, Dad's streaming service, the shared credit card I foolishly co-signed for Jack when he was 23, gas cards, insurance, the phone line I didn't even use anymore. Every item was a thread, and I was about to start cutting. I started with the credit card, called the company and asked to be removed as an authorized user. They warned me it might affect Jack's score. I told them I understood. Next was the pharmacy refill. I texted my mother. "You'll need to transfer your prescriptions to your account by the end of the week." No response. I didn't follow up. Then I logged into the family phone plan and canceled my card as the payment method. Each step felt like pulling roots from the soil, deep ones, tangled, but not impossible. At first I thought I'd feel cruel, but instead I felt clarity. I was unweaving a story that had never been mine to carry. There was a moment, as I closed the last account, when my hands started to shake. Not from fear, from relief. Because this was different from saying no once. This was final. This was structure. This was me saying, with every click and confirmation, I will not fund my own erasure anymore. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and stared out at the trees. The sun was dipping low, casting shadows across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped against a tree like a heartbeat. And I thought about how many years I had lived in reaction mode. Someone else's problem, someone else's fire, someone else's timeline. I had built my life around being accessible. And when you're always accessible, you eventually become invisible. Because nothing that's always there gets truly appreciated. I don't blame them entirely. I trained them to believe I'd never say no. Every time I said it's fine, every time I picked up the pieces without asking them to be careful, every time I bailed them out, I was teaching them that I didn't need boundaries, that I didn't have limits, but I did. I just didn't know I was allowed to enforce them. Now I do. And here's the thing about letting go. It doesn't always feel like soaring. Sometimes it feels like standing still, finally. Like being able to sit in your own home and not worry who's going to need you next. It feels like space, like air in your lungs that isn't tied to someone else's breath, like coming home to yourself. I looked up at the sky and whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the girl I used to be, the one who gave too much, the one who wanted to be seen so badly she disappeared, the one who thought love had to be earned through sacrifice. We're done carrying what was never ours, and in the silence that followed, I swear, I felt her exhale. The ocean was only 3 blocks away. I could hear it at night, soft, rhythmic, like the world itself was breathing. The new apartment wasn't glamorous. It was tucked above an old bookshop with faded shutters and creaky stairs. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person, and the floors slanted just enough to make chairs wobble. But the windows faced west, and every evening the light would spill across the floor in golden streaks like honey. I loved it instantly. There was no furniture when I moved in, just blank walls and dust and the smell of salt air sneaking through the cracks. For the first time in years, I wasn't decorating for someone else. I wasn't asking, will Mom like this? Or, is this too expensive with Jack's rent due? I was choosing for me. I painted the walls a soft gray blue, like the sky just before a summer storm. I bought secondhand shelves and filled them with books I had never had time to read. I picked out sheer white curtains that danced with the breeze like they had secrets to share. Every decision felt like a quiet rebellion, a reclamation. I didn't need anyone's approval to put up fairy lights in the kitchen or hang that ridiculous ceramic sun over the stove. I liked it. That was enough. One afternoon, I found a small cactus at the local market. It sat in a chipped yellow pot, half forgotten on the discount table. It wasn't the prettiest plant there, but something about it called to me. Stubborn, resilient, low maintenance. I brought it home and placed it on the windowsill. I named it June. She didn't need much, just light, a little water, a quiet space to grow, just like me. I started waking up earlier, naturally not because someone needed something. I'd open the windows, let the breeze in, and make myself coffee in a chipped mug I bought for $1. No one interrupted. No one needed comforting. No one was disappointed. It was just me. And the silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was sacred. Each day I found joy in the smallest things. The way the light hit the bookshelf just right, the sound of seagulls arguing in the distance, the satisfaction of lining up my spice jars in alphabetical order, the ritual of making tea, not because someone else wanted it, but because I did. I was finally living in a space that reflected me, not a version of me shaped to fit someone else's need, not a draft of me edited for other people's comfort. Just me, whole, unfiltered. I didn't post photos, I didn't send updates, I didn't invite anyone over. This space was mine. Every corner, every crooked shelf, every beam of light that warmed the wooden floor. And in that space I started to hear a new voice, one I hadn't listened to in years. My own. It was quiet at first, unsure, like a radio tuning back into a forgotten frequency. But it was there. And every time I chose paint colors or rearranged books or watered June, that voice grew louder. You matter. You're allowed. You don't have to disappear to be loved. And maybe the world hadn't told me those things, but now, I was finally telling them to myself. There was a question that used to haunt me. It would echo in my mind every time I thought about stepping back, every time I hesitated to draw a boundary or say no. If I don't carry this, who will? It sounded noble, responsible, like I was keeping something important from falling apart. But the more space I gave myself, the more I realized there was a dangerous lie hidden inside that question. It assumed I was the only one capable. It assumed the world would collapse if I stopped holding it up. It assumed that love was a burden I had to shoulder in silence. For years I had worn that belief like a badge of honor. I thought it made me strong, reliable, unbreakable. But the truth was, it made me tired. It made me resentful. It made me invisible. One afternoon, I was reorganizing the tiny kitchen cabinet in my new apartment when I found an old sticky note tucked behind a jar of cinnamon. It was my handwriting. Faded ink, curled at the corners. It said, pick up Mom's meds, pay water bill, check in on Jack, don't forget groceries. A to-do list from another life. I stared at it for a long time. It was small, barely legible, but it held the weight of who I used to be. The one who never forgot. The one who always anticipated. The one who believed that love meant never dropping the ball. I folded it in half and dropped it in the trash. That evening, I took a walk down to the beach. The sun was low, turning the sky into a watercolor of soft orange and lavender. The tide was gentle, barely touching the shore. I stood barefoot in the sand, letting the water kiss my toes, and asked the question one more time. If I don't carry it, who will? And for the first time, the answer came back, clear and certain. Someone else. Or maybe no one. And that's okay. Not everything has to be carried. Not every problem needs a hero. Sometimes things fall. Sometimes people learn by picking up their own pieces. And sometimes, the greatest kindness you can offer isn't fixing it for them. It's stepping aside so they learn how to stand on their own. That's what I never understood. I thought I was helping. I thought I was keeping everything from falling apart. But all I was doing was making sure no one else ever had to grow up, including me. Because being needed can feel like purpose. But being free, that's peace. I turned away from the water and walked home slowly, the sky darkening around me, the breeze cool on my face. And as I reached the porch, I felt lighter. Not because the weight was gone, but because finally I'd stopped believing it was mine to carry. One rainy morning, I found a folded paper map tucked into the back of an old travel book I'd bought at a used bookstore down the street. It smelled faintly of salt and dust, its edges soft from wear. The kind of map that belonged to a glove box in a car that had seen a lot of long roads and forgotten exits. I laid it out on my kitchen table, flattening the corners with coffee mugs and a book of poems. It showed the eastern half of the U.S., faded highways, dots of towns I'd never heard of, winding rivers that looked like they had secrets. I didn't unfold it with a plan. I just stared at it and let myself wonder. Where would I go if no one needed me? If I didn't have to explain? If I didn't have to ask permission or coordinate around someone else's schedule or mood? If I didn't have to be useful to be allowed to exist? Maine caught my eye first. Not for any logical reason, just something about lighthouses and rocky coasts and clam chowder in paper cups. It felt like solitude without sadness. I circled it with a pencil. Then Arizona. Wide skies, red rock, desert air that didn't apologize for being dry and untamed. I imagined myself standing in silence that stretched for miles. I circled that too. And then Tuscany. That one felt indulgent, like a fantasy whispered too loudly. I'd never been out of the country. I'd never even applied for a passport. But I wrote it down on a sticky note and placed it at the bottom corner of the map anyway, because dreams deserve space too. I stood back and looked at the table. 3 dots. 3 possibilities. No one else's name attached. No one else to convince or take care of or tiptoe around. Just me. And for the first time, I didn't wonder who would come with me. I didn't make a list of what other people needed. I didn't run it through a filter of guilt or logistics or sacrifice. I just stood there and let myself feel excited. Quietly. Fully. I don't know if I'll go to all 3 places. Maybe none of them. Maybe somewhere else entirely. But what mattered wasn't the destination. It was the fact that I had given myself permission to want more. To imagine a life that was wide and unpredictable. A life not shaped by duty, but by desire. I took a pin from my bulletin board and stuck it right in the heart of that map. Not on a city, not on a road, just in the center. The middle of possibility. And I whispered to myself, wherever you go next, let it be for you. Not because someone needs rescuing. Not because someone forgot to plan. Not because someone handed you the weight and walked away. But because your life is yours again. You get to choose now, and that's a kind of freedom no one can give you. You have to claim it. One afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent over the water, I took out my old camera. It had been tucked in a box for years, wrapped in an old scarf and wedged between keepsakes I didn't have the heart to throw out. The battery was dead, but the weight of it in my hands felt familiar, solid, steady. For so long, this camera had been my hiding place. I used it at family events to stay useful without being present. It gave me something to do, a reason to stand on the edges, behind the lens, outside the frame. I thought of all the pictures I'd taken, holidays, birthdays, backyard cookouts, Jack laughing too loud, Mom arranging flowers, Dad asleep in a lawn chair, everyone caught in moments of joy. And me, never in the shot. Always holding the camera, always documenting someone else's life. I brought the camera to my front porch and sat down on the steps. The light was perfect, warm and golden, the kind that made everything feel like a memory even as it was happening. But I didn't raise the lens. Instead, I set the camera beside me and pulled out my phone. I turned it around and snapped a photo. Just me. No filter, no special angle. Hair a little messy from the wind, eyes soft but clear. A half smile. I looked at it for a long time. It wasn't remarkable, but it was real. I was there, in the frame, in the moment, in my own life, not capturing someone else's version of happiness, not curating evidence that I belonged, just being. That night I printed the photo and taped it to my bathroom mirror. Not because I needed a reminder of what I looked like, but because I needed a reminder that I exist. Fully, freely, not in the margins, not behind the scenes, not as the one making everything possible for everyone else. I am not a background character anymore. I'm not the extra. I'm not the helper. I'm not the calm, quiet shadow that holds everyone up while no one asks if I'm okay. I'm the story. I'm the one walking into the light, even if my steps are shaky. And I don't need an invitation to take up space. I don't need permission to live a life that's entirely my own. There was a time I would have felt selfish saying that. Now, I know it's sacred. I'm not here to prove my worth by disappearing. I'm here to show up for myself. I walked back out to the porch as the last of the light disappeared and stood there barefoot on the wood. The world was quiet. The air smelled like salt and rosemary, and I whispered something I hadn't said out loud before. I'm proud of you. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, but it was true. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not fireworks, just a quiet moment where you see yourself clearly and you don't look away. The silence stayed. No more texts, no phone calls. No unexpected knocks on the door? After the legal letter, after the voicemail, after Jack's visit, everything just stopped. And I let it. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fix the distance. I didn't try to fill the space with apologies or explanations. I didn't chase after their comfort, hoping it would be extended in return. I simply sat with it. There were days it felt heavy, like an echo chamber of everything that had gone unsaid over the years. But there were also days, more and more of them, when the silence felt like clean air after a storm. People think peace is something that arrives once everyone forgives each other. But I've learned that sometimes peace begins the moment you stop needing their understanding. There's a freedom in knowing you no longer have to argue your worth. I stopped checking for missed calls. I stopped rereading old texts, searching for something I might have misunderstood. I stopped rehearsing what I would say if they finally asked, "Why did you leave?" They never asked. And somehow that made everything easier. I began to understand that forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's just letting go of the fantasy that the past could have been different. One morning, while making coffee, I caught myself humming. It was a small thing, an unconscious sound like a bird testing its voice after winter. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I made noise just for myself. I opened the window and let the breeze in. It smelled like sea salt and laundry from the neighbor's line. In the background, life was happening without me being needed in it. And that was okay. The world didn't end because I stopped showing up with solutions. Jack didn't implode without my checkbook. My parents didn't fall apart without my constant buffering. Life kept going, and so did I. I started visiting the little market every Thursday. The woman who sold fresh bread began to recognize me, setting aside a loaf before it sold out. I walked to the beach most evenings. I watched the same dog chase the same stick into the waves over and over again. I smiled at strangers. I spoke when I wanted to, not when I felt obligated. There was a quiet rhythm to this version of me, one that didn't revolve around other people's moods or emergencies. And slowly, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe before. I didn't miss them. I missed who I thought I was to them. I missed the idea that my sacrifices meant something, that they saw me, that I mattered. But once I let go of that illusion, I felt lighter than I'd ever been. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, more like shedding a coat you didn't realize was soaked through. I stopped telling myself stories that began with, maybe if. Maybe if I had said it better. Maybe if I had waited longer. Maybe if I had been just a little easier to love. No, I had done enough. I had stayed too long, I had bent too far, and now I was finally still. Not stuck, just still. There's a difference. Stillness makes room. It clears the clutter. It invites truth to sit down and stay a while. And in that stillness, I heard myself think clearly for the first time in years. I'm not here to be useful. I'm here to be whole. It had been months. Not a word from my parents, not a letter, not even a forwarded joke from Dad like he used to send on Sundays. Then one day I got a message from my cousin Clara. "Your parents are in town, staying at the hotel by the marina. Thought you'd want to know." She didn't say more, and she didn't have to. I sat with it for an hour, made tea, washed a few dishes I didn't need to, checked the weather for no reason, and then, without deciding exactly why, I put on jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove to the marina. The hotel was quiet. White stucco walls, large glass windows, a row of palms swaying gently in the breeze. I saw them before they saw me, sitting outside at a shaded table, Dad reading the paper, Mom stirring her tea like it had personally offended her. I took a breath and walked over. They looked up. For a second, no one spoke. Then Mom offered a tight smile. "Well, you look rested." It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't a jab either. That was progress. Dad cleared his throat. "We weren't sure if you'd want to see us." I sat down. "I wasn't sure either," I said honestly. Silence again. They didn't apologize. They didn't ask where I'd been or how I'd been surviving without them. And I didn't expect them to. I wasn't here to mend something that had never really been whole. I was here to see how it felt to be in their presence without collapsing into a version of myself that no longer existed. And to my surprise, it felt okay. Mom started telling a story about Jack, how he might move to Florida, how Lucy came back and then left again, how he still couldn't quite get things together. I nodded politely. But I didn't offer advice. I didn't offer money. I didn't offer anything. I just listened, because that's all I was willing to give. When she paused, I said softly, "I hope he figures it out." Then I looked at them both. "I just want you to know I'm doing well, and I'm not coming back to the way things were." Dad looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't, and that was fine. Because this wasn't about closure. It was about clarity. They weren't going to change. They might never understand why I left, why I stopped answering, why I started charging rent. But I wasn't living for their understanding anymore. I was living for mine. I didn't walk away from my family because I was angry. I walked away because I was done negotiating my worth. That's something people often misunderstand. They think distance equals bitterness, that setting boundaries is punishment, that when you stop sacrificing, it's because you've grown cold. But it's not coldness, it's clarity. It's choosing not to bleed for people who never learned how to bandage you. It's choosing not to explain your pain to those who benefit from your silence. That clarity didn't come all at once. It came slowly, like sunrise through fog. One quiet realization at a time. I remember standing in my kitchen one evening, barefoot, stirring pasta in a pan, music playing low, candles flickering, windows cracked open to let in the salt air. Nothing special, no grand event. But I looked around and realized I felt safe. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, safe with myself. No part of me was bracing for impact. No part of me was calculating what I needed to fix next. I wasn't multitasking survival. I was simply present. And that presence felt like the purest form of love. That was when it hit me. I didn't need to be rescued. I didn't need to be chosen. I needed to be loved by the one person who had always been missing from the equation. Me. Loving myself wasn't about spa days or affirmations scribbled on sticky notes, though those have their place. It was about letting go of the idea that my value had to be earned, that I was lovable only if I was useful, only if I stayed quiet, only if I didn't take up too much space. Now I fill my own space. I light candles just because I like the way they smell. I make dinner for one and set the table anyway. I talk to myself kindly when I mess up. I take long walks with no destination, and I no longer wait for anyone to notice, because I see me now. All those years I spent hoping someone would say, "You matter." I finally said it to myself, and I believed it. That's what healing looks like sometimes. Not fireworks, not apologies wrapped in perfect words. Just a woman standing alone in her kitchen, stirring pasta, humming to herself, and realizing she's finally free. And no, I don't regret walking away. I regret how long I waited to do it. I wish I had known earlier that love doesn't require martyrdom, that peace isn't something you earn by sacrificing your sanity, that it's okay to want a life that doesn't revolve around damage control. But maybe we all arrive when we're ready, and I'm here now. Not because I gave up on them, but because I finally chose me. And that choice wasn't made in anger, it was made in love. The kind I had been giving to everyone else for years, the kind I had always deserved, the kind that says, you don't have to carry it all, you don't have to prove anything, you get to rest now. These days, my life is quiet, not empty, not lonely, just quiet in a way that feels earned. I wake up without an alarm. The sun filters through the sheer curtains I chose myself, and the first sound I hear is the soft creak of the wood floor as I step out of bed. There's no rush. No mental checklist waiting to ambush me before coffee. I water my little cactus, June, who's still thriving on sunlight and occasional attention, just like me. I take long walks down to the beach. I sit on the same bench near the dunes and let the wind braid my hair without asking. Sometimes I bring a book. Sometimes I bring nothing. I've learned how to be alone without being lonely. I've learned how to enjoy my own company without needing to be useful. I pick my own flowers now. I plan my own meals, not around anyone's dietary restrictions or moods, but around what sounds good to me. And when I laugh, it's not from politeness. It's because something genuinely made me laugh. I keep my phone on silent most of the day. I check it when I feel like it. And every time I choose not to respond right away or at all, I remind myself that silence is not a crime. It's a choice, a sacred one. My life doesn't look impressive on paper. There are no fancy titles, no big declarations, no medals for all the invisible things I used to do. But it's mine. Every small detail, every slow morning, every quiet evening with a book and a candle and the sound of the ocean reminding me I am exactly where I need to be. I don't owe anyone that version of me who gave and gave and gave. I owe her this, peace. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the one who holds it all together, if you've ever cleaned up messes no one acknowledged, bit your tongue to keep the peace, or stayed silent because your voice never seemed to matter, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. You are not a placeholder. You are not a background character. You are not the strong one just because everyone else decided they could lean on you without ever asking how much you could carry. I know what it feels like to be appreciated only for your usefulness, to be loved conditionally, quietly, conveniently. But that isn't love. That's expectation dressed up in affection. And you don't have to keep playing along. You don't have to keep giving just because they're used to taking. You don't have to shrink yourself to be digestible to the people who were never hungry for your truth to begin with. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. It's okay to leave the group chat. It's okay to not show up for a dinner where you know you'll be invisible. It's okay to set the phone down when the guilt texts come in. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for drawing a line. And you are not broken for finally saying, no more. The version of you that always showed up without being asked deserves rest. She deserves tenderness. She deserves joy. And most of all, she deserves to stop proving her worth, because she was never a burden. She was the light. And it's her turn to be seen. The wind was stronger that day. I stood at the top of the hill behind my cottage, looking out over the water. The waves moved like breath. The sky was wide and open, like it had nothing to hide. I closed my eyes, let the wind lift my hair, and whispered, I'm done trying to be someone in their story. I'm finally living mine. I used to think healing would look like reconciliation, that one day they'd understand, and we'd all sit down and make peace over coffee and old photo albums. But now I know healing is not about going back. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs to. I am no longer the person who waits to be chosen. I am no longer the girl holding the camera, capturing joy that doesn't include her. I am the woman in the frame now. Alive, present, whole. And if you're listening, if any part of my story sounds like yours, then this is your moment too. You don't need their permission to start again. You don't need their approval to choose yourself. You don't need to keep proving that you're good enough. You already are. So here's my invitation. Choose quiet over chaos. Choose boundaries over guilt. Choose peace over pleasing. Choose you. Even if your voice shakes. Even if no one claps. Even if they never say thank you. Especially then. Because the life you've been waiting for doesn't begin when they see you. It begins when you see yourself. And you're still here. Which means it's not too late. If this story moved something in you, share it. With a friend, a sister, a stranger, someone else who needs to hear that they are not alone. And if you're ready to take your first step toward peace, say it out loud. No more. Then watch what starts to grow in the silence that follows.